Today, we're going to dive into the mind of a true giant, W.E.B. Du Bois. His ideas didn't just play a part in the struggle for racial equality. In many ways, they built the foundation for it. And as you'll see, they're more relevant today than ever. And it all really starts here, with this one powerful, prophetic sentence. This was his North Star. Pretty much everything Du Bois ever wrote or did was an attempt to diagnose, understand, and ultimately to erase this thing he called the color line.
So, let's dig in. What exactly did he mean by that? For Du Bois, the color line wasn't just a metaphor for racism. It was something much bigger, a global system of power that defined the entire modern world. What's so brilliant about his framing is that he saw this line as completely artificial. It wasn't natural, it wasn't inevitable. No, this was a wall that was built brick by brick through laws, social customs, and economic policy, all for one reason: to keep a hierarchy in place. Okay, so he diagnosed the external system, this color line that separated people. But his next step was arguably even more profound. He turned his focus inward to explore the psychological damage that this line inflicted on Black Americans. And you have to remember, this wasn't just philosophical musing. Du Bois was a scientist. He was the first African American to get a PhD from Harvard, and he pioneered the use of sociology. We're talking hard data, charts, and empirical studies to prove the devastating effects of racism. He was taking it out of the realm of opinion and into the world of fact. And all that research led him to develop maybe his most famous concept, from his 1903 masterpiece, The Souls of Black Folk. He called it double consciousness. It's this intense internal conflict of being Black in America. It's the feeling of having two warring identities, being American and being Black, and constantly being forced to see yourself through the eyes of a society that looks down on you. I mean, just listen to his words there. You can feel the psychological weight. It's not just seeing yourself in two different ways. It's this crushing burden of having to measure your own soul, your own worth against a yardstick that was designed to find you wanting. So he's diagnosed the problem, both externally and internally. The next logical question is, what's the cure? What do we do about it? And what's so interesting about Du Bois is that his answer to that question changed and deepened throughout his incredibly long life. Early in his career, he famously clashed with the other major Black leader of the day, Booker T. Washington. You see, Washington preached patience, focusing on economic skills and accepting segregation for the time being. Du Bois said, absolutely not. He demanded immediate political power, full civil rights, and advanced education for what he called a talented tenth who could lead the way. For him, the strategy was protest, not accommodation. And you can literally watch his strategic vision expand over the decades. He starts the Niagara movement, then helps found the NAACP and becomes the voice of its magazine, The Crisis. But he doesn't stop there. His view goes global, and he starts organizing Pan-African congresses, realizing that the struggle in America was connected to the struggle against colonialism everywhere. And by the end of his life, he was critiquing capitalism itself as a root cause of racial inequality. And that global perspective is so key. He began to see the clear, undeniable links between the racism Black Americans faced at home and the imperialism that European powers were practicing abroad. This led to a truly radical critique of power. See, for Du Bois, the color line didn't stop at the U.S. border, not even close. He argued that the very same racist ideas used to justify Jim Crow segregation were being used by empires to justify the subjugation and exploitation of people all over the world. It was one problem, one global system. I mean, he was so far ahead of his time with this. He was essentially making an intersectional argument before that term even existed. He showed how imperialism, the very concept of whiteness, and capitalism all worked together, a three-legged stool of global oppression where race was used to justify power and generate profit. So all of this is fascinating history, right? But here's the kicker. Why are we still talking so much about a thinker who was born right after the Civil War? Well, because his ideas aren't just history. They are a living, breathing framework for understanding the world we live in right now. You might be wondering, how can a century-old analysis really apply to our modern lives? The truth is, once you start looking for Du Bois's ideas, you'll see them everywhere. They're woven into the very fabric of how we talk about race and justice today. Seriously? Just think about it. When we talk about the psychological toll of microaggressions or implicit bias, we're talking about double consciousness. When we analyze systemic racism in the wealth gap or our justice system, we're talking about the color line.
His critique of empire is alive in movements for decolonization, and his whole intersectional approach, it laid the intellectual groundwork for entire fields of study, like critical race theory. He gave us the vocabulary.
So, in the end, W.E.B. Du Bois didn't just participate in the conversation about race and power. In many ways, he created the language for it. His work isn't some dusty book on a shelf. It's a conversation that we are all still a part of today.
Through his incredible scholarship and his relentless activism, he gave us a toolkit, a blueprint for seeing the hidden architecture of oppression, not just socially, but psychologically and globally. He was a true visionary who spent almost 100 years looking at the world as it was and demanding that it become what it ought to be.
And that really leads us to one final crucial thought. Du Bois gave his answer for the 20th century. The problem is the color line. So as we grapple with his enormous legacy, the question he leaves for us is this: how do we define the central problem of our century, and what are we going to do about it?